to another video. I actually got asked a wonderful question today by Sapphire Crystal about how to start the comic writing process, and that's a great idea, so I'm gonna work on that today. I actually wrote down notes so I don't forget anything. Now this process that I'm about to lay out is assuming, just glancing at the notes, that you figured out a story concept, the basics, the basis for your characters and world. Assuming that you have all of that information, at least a general sense of it, then you can move on to these steps that I'm going to outline here. So here I'm just going to give you a basic template that should be able to fit with any world building, plotting style, whether you're a pantser, a plotter, a plotster, anything in between. So first, I would suggest coming up with the beginning and end of your story. This may seem counterproductive because knowing the end before you've figured out everything that happens or the main gist of the story might seem like jumping the gun a little bit. I found it really helpful to know the last scene of my comic before I even started writing it, because if you know that point A, which is the beginning, and point B, which is the ending, then the story is really just figuring out how those two things connect. And that's a lot easier than writing a whole story and then figuring out how to tie a bow on it, I find. So that would be my first tip, to figure out the ending and the beginning, the first and last pages of your story before doing anything else. And it's okay if they change later on. That's fine. I just think that it's important to know them going in so that you don't end up with a scenario where you write this amazing story and then you can't land the ending, because we've seen that too many times. Next, I would check if this audio is working. Once you have your beginning and end figured out, the next step would be plan out the first 6 issues of your comic. Again, assuming you have the basic structure of your story and what's going to happen figured out. I could do another video about how to do that, but once you have the basic gist figured out, then you would be working on the first trade paperback, which would be one of these. Now, this is not the first trade paperback in Saga. Amazing comic, by the way. This is the most recent, I believe. But a trade paperback is basically the first 6 issues of your comic compiled into a small booklet. There are larger sizes, but this is the one that I've seen most often, at least. It's about 6 issues, and it's a cohesive story arc. So that's at least how I approached. I would write out sort of just a basic structure for the first 6 issues and then the next 6 issues. And this way I would have cohesive story arcs that all tied into the larger story. Not all comics do this, but at least with Saga, which was the comic that got me into comic book writing, there are also larger issues like these. I don't actually know what these are referred to as, but this is, I believe, 18 issues, so it's 3 of these. And I love the idea of having a larger collection with a story arc inside of a story arc, almost, because I noticed when reading Saga in its ignore that squeaking sound. In this form and in this form, that this would have one cohesive story arc, and then 3 of those cohesive story arcs would fit into this, which would have a larger overarching story arc. And I just loved how that all fit together. It's like a little puzzle. And I think that having that sort of format there and seeing that time and time again repeated in a, not a repetitive, a negative way, almost repetitive in a positive way, I really appreciated that. And as someone who's a big fan of lists, it made the comic book writing process seem a lot more doable. It made it seem possible to me, whereas before it was completely daunting and I had no idea what to do. So to plan out your first 6 issue arc, I would just say that you need a pencil and a piece of paper. I'm not actually going to use my comic because I actually brought in the page that has all the information that I had initially done this process with, but it's very spoilery, and hopefully maybe one day you could be reading this and I don't want to ruin the whole first 6 issue arc for you. I'm just going to make up a comic concept. I'll just sort of plan out this fake comic. Okay, so let's say my concept is about a group of people who end up stranded in the Arctic, okay? That's what I came up with. This little 6-issue arc, the overarching goal is that by the end of it, they're going to meet a group of people. Maybe like they'll find like a research facility that's in the Arctic and they'll encounter other people. And then the next issue arc will be about whatever happens there. Issue 1 would just be like intro characters and crash. Let's say they're in a plane that crashes. Issue 2 would probably be coming to terms with each other, like coming to grips grips with each other because they probably don't know each other. So it would be sort of about them banding together. Issue 3, let's say we probably would want to introduce a conflict because, you know, we spent issue 2, the sort of conflict was them all coming together. Probably there's some disagreements at first, but now issue 3, things are peaceful, but then maybe by the end of issue 3, there's like a cliffhanger, like, oh no, what's gonna happen next? You're like halfway through, things seem to be going their way, all capitals, but ... and then whatever is going to come in issue 4. So let's say maybe it's all peaceful and good, they're all working together, we're getting to see some of the characters interacting with each other, we're getting to know more about them and their backstories, and then the last page is like somebody hiding some of the food rations or something like that, you know, like a conflict within the group being foreshadowed. So peaceful but end with foreshadowing. And let's say that issue 4 is that foreshadowing coming to light, but in a small way. We don't want to do it right away. If this is going to be a drawn out conflict that we're setting up for maybe a later issue, we want to have a small thing. So maybe one person realizes, but the other person talks them into keeping it quiet. Maybe this person who's hiding the food is going to become sort of like our antagonist, or at least like an anti-hero. Like they're not really working with the group, but maybe they'll be redeemed in some way. So how do I summarize that very small? Okay, so one character notices conflict, and then meanwhile, what's going on in the larger group will just be like signs of civilization. Like maybe meanwhile, if we're at issue 4 and issue 6 is going to end with them finding the research outpost, we should start sort of sprinkling that in. So maybe they find like, or maybe they don't even all find it. Like maybe somebody swears they see smoke in the distance. The rest of them don't really believe it, but this one person convinces the others to go that way just in case. And then maybe in issue 5, there's some sort of like natural disaster-y sort of thing. Maybe there's a blizzard. Okay, so I'm just gonna write blizzard. I personally like to have one issue every 6 issue arc that's just for me. I think that's important, to write something that's very exciting to you and that maybe surprises your readers a little bit, because if you're very excited about what you're writing, your writing's just gonna be better. I first did this in the first 6 issues of my comic. Issue 4 was just an idea that I had, and I have no idea if anybody else is gonna like it, but I love it, and I'm gonna leave it in there. And I think that that's important. And I feel like every arc, you should just let yourself have an issue that you're very excited about. No, I'm not saying to totally disregard the story. Like if you are having a fantasy epic and then you just spend a whole day in a market bartering for apples, maybe your readers are like, what? How did this happen? But maybe if you can make that really entertaining and it shows you something about the characters. Think about like Seinfeld episodes. I've recently been rewatching that with my mom and sister. Last night we watched the one where they're literally just looking for their car in a mall parking garage the entire episode. And I was really impressed. Like as someone who's trying to write and publish, and I would love to eventually work in TV, that episode was like a testament to amazing writing to me. And it was funny, it was smart, and it was never boring, even though they literally spent the entire time walking around looking for their car. And I think that sometimes having something like that, where you just really focus down and center in on a small moment, but do it really well, can be impactful. That's not exactly what I did in the 4th issue of my comic. I really went in and I focused on my characters' backstories for that one. But with each of them, it was just like a moment that I wanted to build out, and it told me so much about them. It completely changed how I viewed them as a character moving forward. And I feel like that's really important. And I feel like that's a lot of why I have to actually rewrite a lot of my comics, is because after that issue, they were different people because I viewed them totally differently. I knew so much more about them because I'd focused in and I'd really just let myself write and go, and I wasn't paying too much attention to the wider arc. Whereas before that, it was all very plot driven. And so the characters were sort of taking a back seat to what was happening in the world around them. And I think that that was a flaw in my writing. But then let's say in the 6th issue, after the blizzard, where we've just focused in, maybe we focus in on the character dynamics, because they've been, maybe the entire issue is just them being stuck in like a makeshift tent and having to go out and shovel the snow off so it doesn't collapse, and they're all just really crammed together, and we can see like the tensions rising between all of them. So yeah, blizzard, tensions rise. And then issue 6 is maybe the blizzard passes. They're all very relieved, and it's a very hopeful issue, which will then lead into sort of the decline of that hope as they figure whatever sinister thing is happening in this research facility. Now, it doesn't have to be a sinister thing just because it's a research facility, but I mean, it's a comic. You want to have big plot moments. And if they got out in the like 7th issue because they found civilization, that wouldn't really work. So maybe these people have some sort of dark secret. So issue 6 is hopeful, end of Blizzard, and find research facility. Okay, so now that we have our 6 issues lined up, this looks really bad. I know. So maybe pick a bigger notebook than I did. Then we would move on to the second step, which is to lay out each page of your first issue. I'm actually D&D books. Wonderful game, wonderful tables. Let's say issue 1. I'm gonna really regret using this tiny note. So we'll just write down like issue 1 up top. And then I would put the name of whatever project it is that you're working on. But we're gonna call it Snow. That's a really creative name. They're straight in the Arctic. What's it called? Snow. So then issue 1 is intro characters and the crash. An issue of a comic usually has about 20 to 22 pages if you're talking about a monthly comic. All comics aren't necessarily monthly, but if you are doing a monthly comic, something like Saga, or like what I hope mine will be, then it would be about 20 to 22 pages. We'll say 20 here because I usually write 20 pages. First issues can also be longer, like Saga had a double-sized first issue, so I believe it was 44 pages. Just to sort of fit everything in and make sure you're not rushing. For this, we'll just go with the 20 pages. So we'll just take a notebook, label it, and then write, just number the lines. Hey, that actually worked perfectly. There's exactly, well, not exactly. There's about 20 lines. And then just decide what will be taking place on every page. Now, this isn't for everyone. I know I started out doing it this way, and then I gradually evolved to just winging it on the spot. Most of the time when I sit down to write an issue, I know what needs to happen because I first planned it out in this stage when I was planning the trade paperback and the 6-issue arc, but sometimes I will need the page-by-page breakdown, especially when I'm doing a very plot-driven issue, because I find that I have a tendency to just sort of ramble on in scenes, and sometimes I really need to condense it down, like turn 20 pages into 5 to get multiple scenes in there, because my characters, once they get talking, they're really gonna talk, just like me. So let's say we start out with maybe our main character. Or wait, no, maybe we start out with a character who doesn't survive the crash. That might be more impactful. A real like tone setter. This is gonna be sort of like pretty survival vibes. So yes, what if we start out with a character who doesn't survive the crash? We'll start this out with a character. So we will name this character Steven. And if your name is Steven and you are watching this, I am very sorry. So, Steven acts. You know, maybe we follow his process of getting onto the plane. Maybe it's narrated by our main character. So maybe we start out with Steven packing his bags, going to the plane, running because he almost missed his flight, getting on the flight, falling asleep next to some guy or girl who's just talking his ear off, and it's just a normal, sort of boring flight. It's like 3 pages, and we think that Steven from the future is narrating these 3 pages about him getting to his flight and flying. But in reality, it's the character that we're going to meet later, our actual main character. So Steven Pack's narration by, we'll name him Jake. Narration by Jake. Steven, now page 2, Steven arrives at airport, narration continues, and 3 is Steven on plane, narration continues. And if you're working with an artist, or if you are the artist, it really depends on the project. I can't draw, so I'm going to be trying to work with a comic book artist. This would also give them a chance to really just like let the art sing. Once in a while, I feel like it's important to have a silent panel in your comic, just so that your artist they can tell the story with their art. It's not just about you. This is a collaboration. And I feel like some of the most impactful comics that I've read have really made great use of the splash page, which is a full page image, no panels, and it's just dead silent. Or maybe there's like 1 bit of narration or 1 bit of dialogue, and it's really just letting artist shine. And I think that that's important. You have to remember that you're going into a collaboration. So let's see, page 4 is Crash Initiates. I'm gonna lay this out a little bit differently, actually. See, this is why it's good to do the planning beforehand. Otherwise, you would have written all of this and then realized, because you have to keep something in mind, which is the surprise pages. So it's really impactful, and I feel like this is something that publishers look for, knowing how to use the layout of a comic. So if you're on page, what is this? If you're on page 1, you open up the comic, page 1, that's a surprise, you know? Then page 2 could also be a surprise. Page 3, the moment you open that to page 2, you've already seen page 3. First page and all even numbered pages can be surprises. So you could turn the page and be like, oh, you know, a big moment, a revealing moment. So I'm going to lay it out so that the crash initiates on page 3, so that then we can see page 4 as a surprise where we intro our actual narrator, Jake. I'm thinking maybe this page is a full page splash. We have crashed plane. Maybe they're inside the crashed plane. I think we see Steven dead because we're rejoining him. So yeah, he's there. He's dead. We've jumped forward. It hits immediately that this is a serious situation. Their lives have been lost. And then standing next to him, or maybe the person who was seated next to him, who was talking his ear off and we just found rather annoying, maybe that's Jake, and he's finishing the narration that he's been giving us the whole time in a dialogue bubble. So now we know that he was actually narrating the whole time. It wasn't about Steven. It wasn't Steven's narration. Maybe he's next to him and he's finishing the narration in dialogue bubble, and that's how we intro him on this big splash. So I'll write splash, intro, Jake. And then maybe we're with Jake for a couple pages. So maybe page 5 through 8 is just sort of him coming to grips with the situation, seeing the other survivors, that sort of thing. And then maybe this is around the time that we intro another character. Maybe I'll call her Alicia. Page 8 will be Jake and Alicia talk, and maybe at the end of their conversation they'll be cut off mid-conversation by the arrival of another survivor who overheard them talking, was drawn to the sound. So intro Dalton. Maybe this is Alicia's partner and they both survived, because I feel like some of the characters should know each other, because that would be even more attention, because you're automatically going to side with them even if they're not right. So maybe like how I was talking about one of the characters later on hiding food, or like sort of just doing something that doesn't further the goals of the interest. Maybe this is Dalton, and maybe Alicia and Jake are our primary characters and they are sort of pitted against each other because she automatically wants to side with Dalton and Jake is trying to show her that he's not a good guy. So now we have a future and as you have these ideas, jot them down over here. Now I'm not actually going to be writing this, I'm just sort of showing you the process, but I would jot all of these ideas down in as much detail as you can, or at least to the point where you would remember when you read it. So now that you have the basic gist, let's just say that we fill in pages 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 with just like they're meeting other survivors, they're sort of getting to grips with each other, realizing their situation. Probably some of them are freaking out. And then we'll include page 17 in that. And then 18 and 19 and 20. Now the last page is very important, and the last scene I feel like is very important. So let's say that page 18, they see maybe the blizzard is on the horizon. If the blizzard hits in issue 5, maybe it's really only been a couple days over the course of the whole first 6-issue arc. Let's say that in page 18, see blizzard on horizon. And then maybe on page 19, one of the characters sort of steps up and is like, takes charge. Like everyone sees this blizzard, they've just crashed, they're all coming to terms with each other, they don't know each other, they're freaking out, and one character steps forward and sort of like takes the leadership role. Maybe it's Jake, and the story is about how he's trying to help these people. Maybe it's Dalton, and he's sort of opposed to the leader. Maybe it's a totally different character who's going to be having to navigate the sort of push and pull of opposing sides as Jake and Dalton each formulate their own sides. So I sort of feel like that would be interesting, because then they're both fighting for whose side this leader would take. So let's say we'll name her Megan. Megan steps up as leader. And then maybe page 20 is a full page splash of these characters, really tiny. So maybe we pull out. So we're looking at them as if they're like the little specks in this giant wasteland that they are. We just have like some narration of sinister foreshadowing. You see the blizzard over there, you see the tiny group down there, and there's just a narration. So splash, switch, perspectives, and foreshadow. So now we have first 6 issues planned out. We have the first issue planned out. And then really you just gotta write. It's that simple. I can't tell you how to write because everybody has a different thing that works for them. And then just repeat this process, honestly. For the rest of your 6-issue arc, once you've written the first issue, plan out the 20 pages or so of your second issue and write it, sleep on it, edit, repeat, and just keep going until you finish those 6 issues. So I hope that this helped. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to be posting every Thursday from now until hopefully forever. So I really appreciate the feedback that I've gotten so far, and if you have any topics that you'd like me to speak about, let me know. The day that I saw Sapphire Crystal's comment, I made this video. Like, I really want to help you all on your journey, and I know it's probably not going to be published the day that I saw the question, but I have a lot of editing to do, so that's understandable. I never know how to end these things, but thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time.